Very often, what I've noticed in my classes, they sit in circle and I usually ask them now, what brought you to Reiki? And I did not mean bus, train, or bicycle. They tell me stories about, well, my uncle is sick, or I have my mother is not feeling very well and I heard that I can maybe do something. Or actually I was told 5 years ago that I was supposed to do something with my hands, and I think maybe this might be it. Or I have a child who's chronically sick and I would like to be able to help that child. And so they have a reason, and the reason is usually a physical reason. They want to be able to treat or give Reiki or energy to that person so that they can feel better. It's a very noble and very good reason for them to be drawn to Reiki. That's one of the reasons that happens. The other thing that happens, and of course they don't know that while they're learning Reiki, is what happens to them. And they didn't expect that usually. They don't usually expect that unless they've read something about Reiki. They don't usually expect a change within themselves. But that's really the primary reason that they come to learn Reiki, is because they feel within themselves, and sometimes I always say it's a soul calling. Something is nagging at them to do something different in their life. And Reiki is a wonderful way to do something different.
Yeah. So, and how does it work? Is that a hearing, or what happens?
Well, you know, in my classes I've heard the most wonderful, amazing stories. One woman who said, for instance, I never pick up this magazine, but I was in the train the other day and needed to read something, and I picked up this magazine, I opened it up, and there's this story about Reiki, and so I guess I'm supposed to be here, that sort of thing. Or they come from within themselves, like I said earlier, they're drawn to another energy, or they're drawn to something, to do something new for themselves. This is a class that I just want to take for me. I've done everything for everybody else. I just come here because I want to do this.
And what's your own experience?
My own experience? You mean when I first learned Reiki?
What did you hear? How
well,
come Reiki to you? How came?
Well, that was an interesting story, because I was working as a realtor in Nelson, British Columbia, in Canada, and you know, this lady came into my office and needed a lift home, and she lived 58 kilometers from the office. There's no public transportation. She wanted to know if my colleague was in the office, and she decided, and she wasn't there, and I said, well, I'm offering to take you home. She came her name was Wanya Tuan. She came from Sweden with her 2 daughters, who at that point, I think 10 and 12, and they had been on Christmas holiday. It was January the 11th, 1980. And when she came to the office, I did some things at the office to prepare myself, drove them home, and at the end of the time she said, I thank you very much. If there's anything ever I can do for you, and she held out her hands, I have healing hands. And at the time I thought, oh, that's interesting, and I said goodbye to her and I went home. A couple of weeks later I had to go for an annual checkup, and was told that I had a growth in my uterus and I needed to have surgery immediately. This was in 1980, so there was not all the tests available. And as I drove home with the feeling and the fear of that particular prognosis, it was like, you know, Wanya was sitting in my car, and I kept hearing on the 26 kilometers home, I have healing hands. I have healing hands. It was almost like she was sitting beside me in the car. It was a very strange experience. So I have healing hands, and it kept coming to me, I have healing hands. So for me, it was a message from Wanya, but also a message from within myself to follow up with that. So I called her up